Your parents were immigrants to the United States. How could someone like you end up at the most recognizable house in all of the world?
Boy, that's a good question.
What is your story? I know it's good.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. First generation. My parents came here from South Korea, and very poor growing up. They were a very typical immigrant sort of story. Came here with really not a whole lot, but just sort of a desire to raise a family and start a new future in the United States. And once we were here, my parents aren't political creatures, really. They're not big fundraisers or sort of in the political world. And so my getting into politics was more driven by the values that they had, feeling deep commitment and inspiration that we drew from being in this country, and how lucky and fortunate we were to have spent time living in the community that we did in Arizona. And so my feeling was I wanted to give back to that community, not necessarily a political way, but driven by social justice, creating opportunities for people, folks who are in kind of my community, low income, lots of working class folks that looked out for one another. And that was always something that we believed to be true in the United States, that's what we do, that you look after one another. And from that moment, working in campaigns, we were talking about this earlier before, that my contribution was going to be, I was going to work really hard for people who are smarter and more capable than I am. Many of which are in this room right now. I'd say most of you are probably smarter and better looking than I am, at least. I'm not going to blow anybody away with my intellect. I'm a smart guy, but not the smartest guy out there. I'm a man of modest proportions, right? I'm not going to be intimidating any of you to coerce you to get to go and do what I ask you to do. But I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to hustle, and I'm going to get up earlier and stay later and work harder and smarter. And I was going to do those things for the cause that I cared about. And so with that, a lot of people wanted me around. So I worked for Governor Napolitano at an early age. I worked for Al Gore in 2000, John Kerry in 2004, really picking the winners at this point. And really got lucky, and I was fortunate to have an opportunity to work for a junior senator of Illinois very early on in 2007, when we were down 30 plus points nationally. No one gave us a shot, but I felt like he really inspired me, and his story was very much my own story. I think that's sort of the magic behind President Obama, is that his story is kind of like an ink blot. It's whatever sort of you can project your own story or vision for the country and the narrative that he has painted out in his books, and the rest is history. I was able to con my way into the White House eventually, always feeling like I never quite belonged there, but there are folks there who appreciated loyalty and hard work and a deep, abiding commitment to public service. And so I was fortunate that they gave me the opportunity to be a part of the team.
So, did you ever guess that you'd end up there? 18-year-old Ronnie who was getting started in politics. Did you have a plan, I guess? Did you set this in Ronnie Cho's master plan that I'm going to work at the White House and then whatever else is after that?
No. It's one of those things, you can't plan for it, really. There's an old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plan, right? I think for me, it was never about the destination of going to the White House, because for me, it was about public service in a bigger way. That the job itself of being at the White House, yeah, it's nice. It's an honor, it's a privilege, but it's more about what I was going to do to get there, and if I were to be so lucky to be there, what I was going to be doing to stay there. And I took the most unlikely route to the White House, right? I'm a Democrat from Arizona. There are like a dozen of us, so, we got to stick together. And you from Arizona? Where? Tucson. Well, I'm from Phoenix, so. And I went to Arizona State. Anyway, we can talk later about that. And worked for some campaigns that didn't win. Right? John Kerry, for instance. I worked in government, and I left D.C. to be a journalist in New York, and And then I also worked for a guy who was down 30 points against the most formidable political machine the country's seen in a generation with, Hillary Clinton and the Clinton team. So I didn't pick the most obvious way and the easiest path to the White House, but that has made it all the worthwhile, is that I was able to learn from smart people, passionate people, very talented people that because it wasn't a sure thing, we were given an opportunity to be creative and and sort of be entrepreneurial.
I know, Ronnie, we were talking about, so I've been on the White House mailing list since President Obama was elected to office. And I distinctly remember the email that was sent out introducing Ronnie Cho, and I've wanted to meet him every day since, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity now.
You gotta get you a life, man. That's, to remember those things, it's kind of...
Right. But, so Ronnie, can you tell us a little bit about your role at the White House as Director of Youth Engagement?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the genesis of having a youth liaison. This is actually the first president to have someone full-time who's dedicated to the needs and concerns of young people, as if young people just were invented in the last 5 years, right? And young people just started having opinions and visions for the country that they live in. Sort of a no-brainer, right? And I think it also speaks to the fact that the president, for a very long time, has shared an interesting and I think important and special connection to young people, going back to his time as a state senator, even before then as a law professor, as a community organizer, really, I think, a genuine affection for the power young people have and the enthusiasm and kind of the vision, the optimistic vision that we have for the country. And he very clearly wanted to bring that to the White House. Well, and also he sort of owed it to us. We got him elected twice, but it was an important thing for him to stay connected to this generation that he feels such a connection with. And so, for me to represent that for the president is a tremendous honor. This is a generation that he feels so inspired by and does not shirk away from any of the challenges or does not feel intimidated by the immense challenges the country faces because, I think in large part, of the young people that he's had on his staff, the people he's seen across the country. We were talking about this before, but generally speaking, this is a generation that's not really at odds with one another about issues like whether women are capable enough and smart enough to take care of their own health decisions, or to have a place in the workforce, or if you love whoever you love, that you should be able to have a family and live in a committed relationship. Like, we're not really fighting about that amongst ourselves. Whether or not, if you come from a different part of the world, that there's a place for you in this country. Again, we're not really fighting among one another if that's true or not. Things like climate change, economic inequality. We're all sort of in the same boat, and we realize that those are big challenges. So when you're not focused on those quote-unquote problems, you enable yourself to create some space, intellectual capital, and energy around actual problems, right? The real stuff that's holding the country behind, the real stuff that's holding the world behind. And so when he looks at people in this room and people just like us across the country, he knows that, one, we can take these challenges and meet them, but also that we have to. That the generation before us probably should have figured out these problems a long time ago. We've been talking about social justice for generations, right? There's a tried and true tradition here at this university to advance those causes, but we haven't done nearly enough to get to where we ought to be. We've made tremendous strides, but really a lot of those problems should have been figured out. But it's up to us to do it, and I think he understands, and I certainly do, traveling the country and getting a chance to meet with folks like you all, that we are going to meet those challenges, and this will be known as the next greatest generation of veterans.
Now, Ronnie, that sounds great, but here I am, college student. I'm worried about getting a job, finding somewhere to live, putting food on the table. I'm not really concerned with what's going on in Washington. How do you reach someone like me?
Yep.
How do you connect to folks like that who, quite frankly, aren't really worried about what's going on in Washington. And, by the way, is it important that we do be concerned about that?
So the answer to the second part of your question is yes, you have to be concerned about what's happening in Washington. I mean, this is a group, I'm going to get a little excited here. Now that I can speak a little bit more frankly about how I really feel about the people in Washington, D.C. Some real talk, just between us, okay? Look, it's a mess, to say the least. I used other language earlier, but I think we're live streamed, so I'll try to keep it PG. Look, this is a group of people, I'm mainly talking about members of Congress who, there are things like 90% of the people, American people, thought it was probably sensible after the events in Newtown, the shooting in Newtown, these babies, these kids were killed. That after that, and a number of other situations similar, that we could probably, again, 90%, the polling says 90% of the American people thought, yeah, let's take a look at people, their background, their criminal history, before we give them an automatic weapon. 90% of the people said that. And yet Congress could not get enough votes to pass even that if you were on the terrorist watch list, that maybe you probably shouldn't be having access to buying a handgun. I don't know. That seems sensible to me. Again, I told you I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but that even makes sense to a guy like me. Terribly frustrating. And to think about, the way people talk about marriage equality, and they talk about immigration, that as if this country is not born and hasn't enjoyed the greatest innovations and progress in human history because of immigrants, because of the influx of people all over the world coming to this country, contributing something to the story, that we're still struggling to find a way to make it easier for people to live a life in the United States. Terribly frustrating. Everyone needs to be concerned with what's happening in Washington. But that's not even enough to be concerned and paying attention. It's very difficult to be inspired by the brand and quality and the caliber of leadership that we have in Washington, D.C. What are we going to do about it? Dexter, you have to stay in touch with all of it. But I have to be honest, we are at a point where we can't always rely on Washington, D.C. to do the leading. What I've noticed and I've seen over the last few years is that there are young people, particularly in this generation, who are not waiting for anyone to come save us. Because it occurs to me that we're sort of on our own in a lot of ways. And I think about student loan debt. Our parents, if your parents went to school, I'm a first generation college student, but most folks, if your parents went to school, they didn't have to deal with the same kind of debt that we have to deal with every single day, just to go to school. To finance your college education by mortgaging your future. Is that really the way we want to be doing this? Is there not a better way to finance a college education than to take on tens of thousands of dollars of loans, right? That's a problem. We were the ones that brought this on. Climate change, all these crazy natural disasters are happening. The economy not moving along as quickly as we'd like. Looking for jobs. People are not able to find the jobs that they're the ones they'd like to get as quickly as they'd like, right? We're pulling ourselves out of the worst recession in a generation, in our lifetimes, and still having a tough time. These are real problems. Unemployment rate for young people is twice the national average, right? It's tough. You guys know friends who've just graduated who are still looking for work. These are things that are happening to us. So to look to Washington and other places to help save us, I'm having to say that that's not necessarily the most strategic way. We need to figure this out on our own. So whether that means having to run for office ourselves, to create new companies, new models, new innovative ways of creating change and supporting our communities, we have to figure that out. Because the generations before us have given us a lot to deal with, and not a whole lot of solutions to meet those challenges. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon with you guys. But the challenges are immense. It's tough. It's tough for all of us. But for the reasons I articulated before, I think we are capable of meeting those challenges because we have to. And because I think we have a better sense of, as the most tolerant, educated, as I mentioned, attractive generation the world's ever seen, I think we are able to meet those challenges, but we're going to have to figure it out, and we're going to have to figure it out quickly.
So how do we do that? And what is it that you did to help do that from the White House perspective?
Well, I think the thing that I was able to contribute very humbly was knowing that I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know everything. And so my job was to make sure that we gave the voice, we gave people like you, Mr. President Dexter McCoy, a voice and a platform to inform us what we needed to care about, what we needed to hear about. What were the concerns of young people, and how do we bring those voices to the White House? Whether it was keeping student loan interest rates low, right? Making sure that we had Pell Grants, increased Pell Grants to the highest levels they've ever been. Making sure that we're able to take away the middleman when it comes to administering student loans, so there's no extra fee that is incurred. We just the federal is a direct a lender to students. Making efficiency as much as possible. These are issues that were coming from students. Things like the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, where we can say Obamacare, it's okay. Making sure that you can stay on your parents' health insurance until the age of 26. These are ideas that are from students for students, from young people for young people. It's about time we had an administration or a government that was listening to the concerns of young people. Again, as if young people just had concerns for the last 3 years, that we never had any opinions before. Now it's incumbent upon us to make sure that that is a legacy item, not just for the president, so we can look back in rose-colored glasses and think about how great it was that President Obama was in office, but to make sure every other president understands that this is an important thing for young people to be at the table, that we cannot make decisions for us without us, which happens far too often, right? That this is a legacy piece, not just for the president, but for us, for our kids, for the future of this country, that young people's concerns are always brought to the forefront, and that we can now no longer be tossed off to the side and figure out, they can figure out later, they're young, they don't really matter, they're not going to be involved in this. That's how you get to the student loan interest rate issue. That's how you get to the student loan debt issue, because no one was advocating, well, should we really be charging this much for school? Should our kids really have to mortgage their futures to spend 4 years at an institution? Who is doing that? Who's fighting back? There isn't an AARP for young people. And if I can make a challenge to everyone, this is one of the biggest sort of selling points I have, is that we need one. We need a force that operates inside Washington, D.C., but also on behalf of people across the country, on our values, what's important to us, to our families, to our communities, and we just don't have that. We need one like that. And the numbers are on our side. We're the largest generation the country's ever seen. It's huge. We're huge. Even globally, half the world's population is under the age of 30. Just think about that. We're growing up in a time where we're sharing the same cultural experiences. Everyone's seeing the same kind of innovations technologically, where the world's flatter than it's ever been. This is an extraordinary time to take hold of all the assets that we have in front of us to really shape and mold the future of the country in the way that we want to see it. Are we a generation that cares about fairness and equality, opportunity? Open question. I'm not leading anyone here. It's an open question for us to answer affirmatively, if that's something that we care about. Do we believe in a world where we can have access to clean air and clean water, that your zip code does not determine the destiny of your life? Are we a country, are we a generation that believes that? And in which case, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to bitch and moan about the crazy people in Washington, D.C.? I can say that because I'm one of the crazy people in Washington, D.C. Or are we going to actually do something in our local communities? Are we going to look to the business and private sector to help save us? The private sector or the public sector to save us? We can't do these things without them. But we also have to look within ourselves and the impact we can make in Boston and communities across the country without waiting for anybody else to come save us.
So I'm going to step back and go a little bit broader here. I know you and I had this debate last night over the future, right? I asked you, what in the world will President Obama do next? What's next for him? He's young, and he's going to be coming to the end of his presidency at some point here in a few years. What's next? And you had some very strong opinions about that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
How do you feel about preparations for the next step?
Well, so I think what you're referring to is I don't like the question of what's next necessarily. I like to know what we're doing today and right now, right? Tomorrow's not promised. Yes, it's important to be able to have a vision and a plan for the kinds of things that you want to live and do in your life. But it's not important to know exactly what that looks like. And I just want to help maybe sort of mitigate a little angst in the room of folks who are about to graduate, who are still not sure what they want to do when they grow up. I am in the same boat, and I'm about 10 years older than most of you in this room. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I don't necessarily know what's next, and that's okay. We can figure those things out. Not to say that it's not important to do things like get paid and eat and have a place to live. These are important things, more or less, right? But I think what's most important is that you are applying the best skills and talents that you have to things that you really care about. And so, for President Obama, I think in some ways, a lot of my friends are excited about his post-presidency in a way that they may not be as excited about his current presidency. They're happy that he's president, but think of Barack Obama at his best, right? When he's interacting with the American people, when he's on the campaign trail, he's talking to and listening to the concerns of the American people. Think about a man who doesn't have to be sort of hinged and tied down to the political muck of Washington, D.C. A man who's able to sort of inject his true vision and values in a way that is separate from having to deal with guys like John Boehner, right? Think about what that would be like when he's not having to debate the issues of people who are wondering whether he's actually born in the United States. Think about if you didn't have to spend time doing that, right? The kinds of things that he would be able to do. So, I don't have any more intel beyond that, but I just think for two things, the president's going to be just fine in his next step. But for all of us here, not always having to look like what's next and getting anxious about what's next. Sort of live in the moment, do what you have to do now, and then I think next sort of figures itself out. If you work hard now, you do the right thing, you're not an asshole, those are kind of simple principles that I like to live by. That next sort of figures itself out, So, just my 2 cents there.
Right, so talk about what's next for Ronnie Cho, though. What are you up to now?
Well, I thought we were going to go out tonight, I thought. Isn't that the thing that's later on? Yeah. Well, so right now, I left the White House, as you guys know. I'm working on this project to connect every American classroom with the world's best broadband. So if you're from an area where I'm from, places like Arizona, there's lots of rural areas, a lot of these students, lots of K through 12 schools don't have access to what you and I both sort of take for granted, having ubiquitous Wi-Fi, high-speed stuff. They don't have it. And if we want America to be number one, our kids have to be number one. We've got to give them the best tools to be competitive in the global economy. And so my role is to help build the coalition and to make sure that the FCC and other members of this team updates this program to connect every school in America with broadband. It's an embarrassing statistic, the number of schools that don't have access to basic telecommunications infrastructure. I mean, when's the last time you guys, when you were looking up something, maybe at dinner or a conversation with your family, and went to a library and picked up an encyclopedia and looked it up? Like, have you ever done that? Maybe a half a dozen times? There are millions of kids, that's the only way that they have access to information beyond what's already in their minds or what's immediately available to them. That's a huge disadvantage that they have to do that. And they don't have access to digital textbooks, digital curriculum. There's no need for a kid in this day and age to lug around 5 10-pound dead tree copy textbooks, right? When they could have a device and there's rich digital curriculum there, and teachers are able to track if Ronnie Cho is falling behind and able to help him at a quicker pace and not have to worry about, is he going to pass this test in a month from now? I can find out now if he's struggling and I can give him some extra help. Schools in different parts of the country or different parts of the world are already doing this. South Korea is already at 100% broadband. By 2016, they're eliminating all printed textbooks and going only to digital. Places like Uruguay, Singapore, Turkey, they're all ahead of the curve here because they've seen the results when students have this technology. Learning is more fun, they learn more quickly, and these are the folks who are going to lead the world. And so much of our place on Earth and our role in the global geopolitical environment relies on our kids and us being competitive So I can get very wonky about this kind of thing, so forgive me, but I'm very passionate about it. I think it's something we should all care about. You know, it's about giving kids the best tools that they can get to pursue their passions and their educational aspirations.
Well, now I want to open it up to you guys to question our dear Ronnie Cho here.
Yes.
So if you have questions, Raul, how do you want to handle this? You want them to come up to the mic? Are we tweeting?
Yeah, we've got some questions that have been tweeted.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
You can tweet at Ronnie Cho, that's my Twitter handle, if I make a shameless plug.
We're going to get some questions now, but if anyone wants, we actually have a live mic, a couple live mics right at the front. Unless you have a loud voice like me and you can just speak like this.
Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Who are you? Introduce yourself to the
My name's
crowd.
Alexander Gola. I guess, what do you want to know? Like, what can I say about myself?
CFA Student Government President, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, yeah, that's what I am. But my question is that
that music coming from?
the senators both talked about student debt. And
Yeah.
how we're really suffering. We graduated from college, a lot of debt.
Yeah.
But they keep on talking about interest rates. What is it that they have, or is there anything to make universities with real symptoms?
Yeah.
The interest rates are a symptom of the problem.
Yes.
What is there to talk about the university's cost down?
Yes, great question, and you and I sort of chatted briefly about this earlier. You know, the interest rate issue is important, but it's not going to solve the issue, right? Like, we need to get to the structural costs of higher education. And the question we all need to be asking every time you meet a member of Congress, a state rep, your governor, mayor, and the president and dean of your university, what are you doing to help keep college costs low? Don't give me any glittering generalities of, you know, whatever. I want to know exactly what are you doing to maintain this cost that's outpacing gas prices. Just think about that. Gas prices. The cost of education has outpaced even the most outrageously priced commodity we have, which is petroleum. Apparently, it's second only to education, right? A basic thing that we all need to be competitive and to fulfill our personal and professional aspirations. Ask them that everywhere you go, and don't let them off the hook when you're asking them. If they give you an answer that's not satisfactory. We need to electoralize this issue. In the same way, there's sort of a litmus test of any presidential candidate, any congressional race, etc. The kind of things like education, healthcare, jobs, environment, different social issues, where they stand, and it determines whether or not you're going to vote for them. Let's make this an issue where we're not going to give you a vote if you don't tell me on the substance and in granularity, what are you doing to contain the cost of higher education? There has to be a political motivation for people to be on the right side of this issue. Otherwise, no one's going to do anything about it because we haven't been able to articulate and show that there's political consequences for letting us down, for failing this generation. You will not be sent to Congress or to the White House or anywhere else unless you figure this out and help us manage the costs, not only the debt that we've already incurred, but the future debt that your younger brothers and sisters will have to deal with in the years to come. This has to be an issue that we bring up everywhere we go and in every possible venue when you're with some of these leaders.
Great question, Alex. Thank you.
I get really fired up about that because it's really
Right here, Rick. Can you stand up, Rick? Thanks.
Hello, Rick.
I'm personally concerned about how, Israel, the Syrian jihadist front, maybe attack America just like 9/11. And if people start having prejudices against Middle East once again,
Sure.
then how would you engage that?
Well, so there's a lot. Those are huge assumptions there. So I can't. You don't want to comment on something like that if we were to be attacked, because heaven forbid that would ever happen. But I think maybe what your question is, how do we combat sort of racism or things like that, like ignorance. I think a decade ago there weren't gay characters on TV, for instance, right? But eventually Hollywood and media and the news came to where they think most American people already were. So it's that kind of a thing where we have to dispel these stereotypes and stigmas and accept the way our friends, people in our community interact with one another, and not be so knee-jerk reactions to kinds of caricatures of people. So to answer your question, look, I don't know what's going to happen in the Syria stuff. It seems to be, the temperature seems to be cooling down a little bit. They weren't asking me about what I thought about national security issues. But when it comes to a broader sort of generational vision and feeling about what this country is, I think we're in a much better position to deal with issues like hatred for stupid reasons, ignorant reasons. And I think that is, again, one of the characteristics of this generation I think we should feel very proud of.
I guess along similar lines there, one person asked, in what ways is our generation uniquely suited to tackle the social challenges of our time?
So, that's a great question. I think when it comes to this is going to sound inarticulate, but we have we just get it, right? Like that sort of X factor that we just understand each other in a deeper, more thoughtful way than other generations have before. Look, we stand on their shoulders, no doubt about it. We are grateful for the progress that they have made so we can be here today and have this beautifully diverse group of people in this room. But when as I mentioned before, when you're not bogged down by the tit for tat kind of stupid stuff about defunding Obamacare so millions of people who need health care can finally get it, right? We're not really fighting about that. Whether people who love each other should be married. Again, I don't want to diminish how important that is, that we're not fighting about that among one another. Because how many bills have we signed in Washington, D.C. in the last couple of years? Right? It's not exactly the most productive bunch of people because they're screwing around with all this other bullshit and not actually doing enough to help you get a job, to create more economic opportunity, to lessen the burden of student loan debt, right? They're not working on those things in the way that we need them to. And so for our part, once we do assume the mantle and take over and assert our values and our passions politically, socially, economically, you name it, there's going to be a sea change in a way we've never seen before. A real era of progressive change that's not ideological, it's pragmatic, it's practical. It works for people who are both on the D side or the R side, because that stuff means less to us. Your political identification means less to us than it ever has before. And if you're a political party and you're running the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, you ought to be terrified about how many folks identify themselves as independents and don't want to play this sort of hand-to-hand combat of the political back and forth because it's all bullshit, it's all theater, it doesn't do anything. We want to make change, we want to get shit done. We don't care about scoring political points. That is something I think I look forward to in the future, to see how we shape the political process in a way that we think will work more effectively.
Good. So what is the number one thing for young leaders to keep in mind while working in their respective fields?
So I would say a couple of things. When it comes to work, and I'm going to speak from my own personal experience, I think your work ought to be more than about professional recognition and more about a performance of your humanity. The things you care about. If you're going to be a neuroscientist, great. Or a neurosurgeon? Neuroscientist, great, yeah, okay. You should do that. You should do that not only because it's a prestigious field and you're going to make a buttload of money, but you should do it because you're going to help people, right? I got into public service not because I wanted to work at the White House, to have this glamorous job, to work in this great building. It was because I wanted it to be a performance of the values that I have as an American, as a child of immigrants, as a guy from a working class background, what I was going to do to manifest that in a professional world. That's what I want folks to take to heart. Is that everything you're doing should be a way for you to display how great you are, how smart you are, how passionate and tolerant and compassionate that you are, and apply that to your day-to-day job. Now, you might not all be public servants, that's okay. We need more of you, but that's okay. You can do well and do the same thing in finance, in business world, in education, you name it. I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about, when I met with some interns this summer. I think Danielle was here earlier. And I was speaking about career stuff. And, for my own part, as an unabashed liberal and progressive, and meeting with some interns and young people who were of similar ideological persuasion, when I asked them what they wanted to do with their lives or what they were going to do after they graduated, some of them said, well, I'm going to go into finance. And they sort of said it in a sheepish way. I'm going to go into banking, investment banking. I said, well, don't be afraid of that. That's great, actually. Because we need progressive values everywhere, right? We need people who have a conscience, who care about social justice in every aspect of our society. To be fair, Wall Street doesn't exactly always have the best reputation, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Washington and politics doesn't have the best reputation. That doesn't always have to be the case. These were once noble professions, to be in the government, to be in public office. Now people don't want to do it because of the garbage that we see happen in Washington, D.C. all the time. We need good, smart, young people in every one of these sectors, and we need them now. So whatever you're doing, make sure that you're able to apply your passions and your values in a way that is going to be helpful, but also fulfills you. And it's okay if it pays you too. That's generally okay, I would say.
And I think that's real good. You talk about the bureaucratic BS that goes on in Washington. And one person asked, how do we as a country move on with 40 congressional attempts to block Obamacare?
Yeah. That I wish I was smart enough to figure out. I don't know what else needs to happen. I mean, the whole idea that they're gonna pass a bill that says defund Obamacare and expect the president to defund a law that has his name in it. I mean, what is that? How do you get past that? I don't understand. A smart question, one that I don't have an answer for, but again, I think it lends itself for us to understand that these guys got to get out of here. We got to find, we deserve, the country, your family, your parents, your friends and neighbors deserve a better class of leadership, and you should give it to them. Let's not wait for these folks. You and us, we need to find a better class of leadership, and it ought to be the people in this room, a generation across the country who feel the same way.
Okay, so where do you look? Oh, well, let's go ahead. Rhea.
Hi. Hi, Rhea. Well, I think there's a couple of very basic things. It's not a novel concept, but ultimately it is about holding our leaders accountable for the lack of access that you described, which has been pervasive for a very long time. It's making sure that they know that there are consequences, as I mentioned. That you ignore us at your peril. You ignore the largest generation, the most organized, most connected, both digitally and otherwise, generation the world has ever seen. You ignore all of that at your peril, at your professional peril. The livelihood that you make of making decisions on our behalf without ever asking us what we thought, you do so at your peril. We need to make sure that that becomes a reality. It's not an empty threat. And that takes a long time to build a movement that way. I think we're all very smart, and this generation has a lot of great stuff, but I think we have a tendency to be impatient, right? There's sort of an instant gratification thing that we've gotten used to. These are generalities, so forgive me, but I think that is true for a lot of people our age, and that we want it now, we wanted it yesterday. But these movements, especially these kind of social justice movements that we're talking about, that we want to, help grow and cultivate, take time. And so the time is now, and the time has actually passed for us to begin this work. And it starts by showing up. It starts by showing up on a Saturday, beautiful Saturday morning, just like what you guys are doing. This is the kind of stuff that makes shit happen. You gotta show up, and you're doing that, and you should feel good about the efforts that you guys are making every single day on behalf of the students and the people that you represent.
Right, I'll give you the floor. Make a quick last statement you want to say, wrap up remarks.
Well, I want to take one last question over here. This young lady, she had her hand up a couple times, and then I'll
go ahead,
wrap it.
and then the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Oh, in the back, actually. I'm sorry. We have time for 2 questions. Great. I'm running the show now, so. Sure. Yeah. Great question. So, I don't want to, I should have been more clear. When I said we shouldn't wait, I'm mostly referring to us sort of just complaining about it and not willing to do anything about it when it comes to whether it's we are running ourselves or if it's organizing a local campaign or raising awareness of issues that we think other people should care about. It's our job not to wait for other people to take that initiative, right? And simple steps in which to do that. There are really great candidates, issues out there, organizations that are doing amazing things that you should lend your time and energy towards. None of this is easy, right? Like, if you want to lose weight and be healthy, there's a secret recipe for that. It's called diet and exercise. Right? And that there is no secret. You just got to do the hard work to build these kinds of things and put in the time and the effort to do it. And so, for our part, you just got to be thoughtful in the organizations and the efforts that you identify that are important, that are effective, and be willing to give your time and energy and your talents towards them, and to not give up when you might fail. There are a lot of things that have happened, and again, this is a perfect place to talk about the arc of the moral universe. Right? And there have been many, many setbacks that have kept us from advancing in the speed and the strides that we really deserve and what we really ought to be moving at. But we're getting there. And so for that, we need to be able to be persistent in all of our efforts to advance those goals. Last question here.
My question is, for those of us who are interested in politics and everything, how can we get involved? Because I feel like there's only so much we can do, and that in a way that we're kind of pushed to the side and said that we don't really, because we don't have that experience or because we aren't old enough for this or that we don't really have a say, or that we don't really have anything important to contribute, which I disagree with. But
yes. So the short answer to that is, well, one, who gives a shit about what people say about whether or not you're capable or smart enough to do it? To paraphrase a great 21st century poet, just kind of one of those things, right? I would say that you just got to get involved. Whether for me, my entry to politics was I just volunteered, I showed up, and I sort of never left, And there's one thing that I know about politics: people appreciate cheap labor. And so I came in and I worked for $1 signature to get Al Gore on the ballot in 2000. Not sexy West Wing stuff, but that was my entry to politics. And I never left. And I demonstrated that I was willing to work hard, ask questions, show up, and be loyal. Those are the key things, I think, when it comes to politics from a practical level. Loyalty is it is a finite natural resource when it comes to we're operating in the political world, right? Loyalty is a tough thing to come by, and if you can demonstrate you got a little bit of it, you got a good future in politics. For you, and anyone else who's interested in public service and politics, you should identify a person or a cause that you really care about, and just give your all towards it. You're all too young to be working for people that we don't actually give a shit about, especially if you're going to be cheap labor. You might as well get something out of it that fills your heart up if it doesn't fill up your bank account. And I think that's an important thing to think about, that you just got to show up, work hard, don't be a jerk, and again, a lot of those things kind of figure itself out. People are going to want you. They're going to want to have you around, and that's when things get fun and exciting. So I'll wrap up here very quickly and say, this has been an amazing experience to sit and chat with you and sort of be a little bit more uncensored. Sorry if I swore too much. That's sort of just the way I speak. But I'm happy to talk about anything else. I'm going to be around for the next couple of hours throughout today, and hopefully we'll get together later tonight. But look, there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be proud of our generation. We are the change that we seek in the world, and so much of it happens in places like this. But we can't be complacent. You got to be good to each other, and this is going to be the next greatest generation, and it has been my honor to have represented you guys over the last 27 months of my life. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.